All right. Welcome to Arlan Hamilton. Welcome to an intimate conversation with women of color. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So today's guest is Arlan Hamilton. Arlan built a venture capital fund from the ground up while homeless. And that's what really resonated with me, right? I read your book. It's about damn time. It's right there in the back. And it was a powerful book. It definitely demonstrated that, a person can do anything that they put their mind to. Um, Takeaways is that you read a lot, which is obvious by the books behind you, your bookcase. And what really stood out to me and what I took to heart was the chapter on um, writing your own headline. So I did that for myself around my podcast, and I happened to share it with somebody who was a potential guest. And she was like, "Hey, what about this? What about that?" And then from that moment on, I kept having what I call catch up to the vision moments. And those were moments where people spoke what's to come for me, right? They were saying, "Hey, how about this? How about that?" And it all tied into that headline that I created for myself after reading your book. So I thank you so much for that.
That is absolutely fantastic. Very, very
Yes.
cool.
Yeah, and so there's so much that I can say about you. I will definitely upload your bio so that other people have access to that, and definitely for those that buy the book, you'll learn more about Arlen and her journey. So, Arlen, you are the founder and managing partner of Backstage Capital, which is a fund dedicated to minimizing funding disparities in tech by investing in high potential founders who are people of color, women, and or LGBT. Tell us more about you.
Sure, I was raised in the South, so I was born in Mississippi, raised in Dallas, Texas, with my brother, my younger brother, and my mom, and most of my adult life, in my childhood, didn't have much money at all, and so I always knew that I would one day. Like a lot of us, we know we are going to, we just don't know when it's going to happen. And around my early 30s, got really interested in the startup scene and what that could mean for my future, and had a lot of things along the way. But it was really that startup scene. It was like, what could I build? But I also learned at the same time that 90% of venture capital goes to white men in the United States. And as a gay black woman, I was like, there's a lot of odds against me there, and there's a lot of odds against a lot of people I know who are fantastic founders, and that doesn't make sense. So over a few years, I just made the decision and started with researching and reading, like you said, a lot of books and a lot of watching a lot of videos and just kind of researching as much as I could. But over the years, I decided I'm going to start a fund. I don't know how, but I will start one. And the book, how it's about damn time. It really goes into how I was thinking during that time, and what it took to go from essentially homeless. I mean, I had a lot of housing insecurity. I slept at many places that were not my home, that not, and some days I didn't know when I was going to eat or if I was going to eat. And all of that was in my 30s, still in my 30s. And so to go from that to now I manage almost $15 million in assets for our funds. We've invested in more than 150 companies. It's all happened in the last 5.5 years.
Yeah, and you exceeded a goal because I remember that you had that goal, and I think you exceeded that early on. So,
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
said
and
I
it's
was gonna.
huge.
Yeah, I said I was gonna invest in 100 companies led by underrepresented founders by 2020, and we reached that with my team in May of 2018.
That's wonderful. Wow. And that just speaks volumes, right? That especially speaks volume, and it speaks to the the point of this platform, right? So this platform is to elevate the voices of women of color, right? And so you're doing that through your fund, right? So you're elevating the funding of those businesses. As you said, some top talent that otherwise would not get funded, you're able to reach out and fill in a gap. And so you talked a little bit about the importance of that, but why is it important for women of color, LGBTQ women to have a platform to use their voices and or to have your fund?
Well, I mean, we have centuries of time to make up for. We have a lot of lost time to make up for, and this country is as much of ours as it's anyone
Yes,
else's. And I mean, I think we built the country, and we also nurture the country today, and we absolutely have to have our voices heard. We have a lot of time to make up for, a lot of other louder voices to override, if you will, just for equality. I'm not trying to have any sort of supremacy anywhere either way, but equality is great. It's a great goal. And investment, I am the first person to say that if you can hold on to all the equity in your company by bootstrapping, that is my suggestion. Sometimes people get sad because they can't find investors, and I say actually you have the leverage when you can't find investors because you're holding on to the equity in your company, the control, the ownership, the leverage. When I start a company, I try to keep as much equity as I can. I don't try to take on investors. But for those of you who have either been doing that for a few years or know that your company is going to need a little bit of boost extra capital and you're not going to be able to get it from a bank and gonna you're not going to get it fast enough through customers, um, Backstage Capital is a great option because I mean we're incredibly it's incredibly competitive. We invest in 2% or less of what we see, and every bit of resources that we have, we earned it, so it's not like we're going around throwing around money.
right.
But we're definitely a friendly investor in this sea of kind of agenda driven investors in the VC world.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is so important right now, because that is, investment. Investing obviously is a road to wealth and
Yeah,
to generational wealth, which is, you
yeah.
talked already centuries to make up for. And so thank you for what you're doing. So you built a company to provide people of color, women of color, LGBT, a platform for funding. How else are you using your voice for women of color and LGBT?
I wake up every morning thinking about ways of catalyzing other people. And the first wave of those other people is usually black women, just because I just want to bet all in on black women.
Yeah.
So a few ways. Sometimes it's as simple as sharing the opportunities that I have. So I get a lot of opportunities for speaking, paid speaking, um, sponsorship, trips, things, just different opportunities. And for every one that I take myself, I make sure somebody else gets it too. I'll send them, I'll send it this, press. People come to me with press every single day. I get a press request. And people say, "Oh, you're always in press." Well, you know what? For every one time you saw me in press, I sent probably 9 forwards to someone else so they could get the press hit. I think that's important just because it's like getting that representation out there. My mother and I have established a scholarship fund that our first 3 scholarships are to at Oxford University, which is the very first scholarship for a black scholar at Oxford. They've never had that before for an undergrad, so we established that in 2019, and it started in 2020. Our the one we did this exact same time, but it will start this year, is Dillard University, which is HBCU that my mother went to, and that is for a black woman, for a full ride scholarship. Both of these are full ride scholarship, and then the third one is there's a black woman in Europe who we are making sure gets through pilot school because we want to see more black
Oh
pilots.
yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And it's funny you brought up your mom because I was just about to ask about your mom because I know that you spend a lot of time and pretty much when you're front and center somewhere, your mom is next to you.
That's right.
So that's beautiful. So some women of color don't recognize the power of their voices, right? And when I talk about voices, I'm talking about any type of expression. So it could be creatively, it could be speaking, funding, different ways. What would you like to tell those women who don't yet recognize the power of their voice?
Oh, I mean, I go into this in the book so much. I think the biggest takeaways are from that, right? It's about the fact that it doesn't have to be something huge that you're working on to make a difference. It doesn't have to mean, that millions of people, thousands of people see it. It can be in just a gesture. It can be in just you. I mean, imagine if you really thought about. something that you said, something in your journey that you shared, whether that's being having a podcast, starting a blog, speaking, public speaking, writing a book, all of those different things that most people think they can't do. But imagine if one person heard that or read that or saw that and it was the right day for them to hear it, and they either stopped doing something destructive or they decided today is the day I'm going to go out and and live my best life, or this person saved my life, or this person made me feel better about myself. Imagine what that feeling is like. If you haven't felt it before, just imagine it, and imagine that you can do that on a regular basis by sharing your voice. Because everybody, there's a few things I know. One is like everybody is jealous of someone else, no matter who they are. Like they're, your person you're jealous of or envious of is envious of someone else, at least one person in the world. So that's the same vein as like everybody is seeking, everybody is needing someone else to kind of help them see something in themselves. And I also know that there's only one version of you, there's only one you. That's a huge leverage point. We don't all have a lot of leverage in life. I know I didn't for 35 years that I didn't think of. But one thing I did have was that I was myself,
Yeah.
that I was authentic, that we all have that. We're authentically ourselves. I wouldn't be in the position I'm in where I've raised $15 million, earned more millions in earned revenue, invested in more than 150 companies, been on the cover of Fast Company. I wouldn't have been, any of that would have happened if I hadn't been myself and really dialed into me. And so it doesn't start with the biggest thing. It starts with, you know what it started with me? It started with me going on to Medium and I wrote a blog post in 2015. And that's how this all really took off.
Yes. So starting small, starting where you are and just building from there. And I really like what you said about when you do that one thing and the feeling that you get from it, intensify that, right? Magnify that, just continue to do it when you're reaching out to other people. So my sister wrote a book. She's a poet and author, and she wrote a book about dreams deferred. Have you ever had any dreams deferred? So dreams delayed, and if so, what did you do?
I mean, I think my whole first 35 years was that because I honestly, since I was about 5 years old, I thought I'm going to be, um, I didn't want to be famous. I've never wanted to be famous, but I thought I'm going to, like, a lot of people will know me and I'll know a lot of people and they'll know what I do. Like, I'll impact people. And I felt that my whole life. I've always felt my whole life that I would be a millionaire. And when I found myself at 34 years old, 35 years old, sleeping at the airport, nobody taking my calls, I was like, this is supposed to happen. But now so many of those things have come true, and so I think my whole life is a dream deferred.
Yeah. And I remember again in the book, the things that you did. There was that one band, and I think the band was overseas, and you
Mm-hmm.
reached out to them and you're like, I'll be your booking agent. And
Mm-hmm.
you just went for it, right? It was things that you wanted. You said, I want this, and you made it happen and you figured it out, right? So kind of going back to the moment that you just said, 30, age 34, 35, and you knew what you wanted for yourself, it hadn't happened. What kept you going?
What kept me going specifically is that I knew that Backstage Capital, this fund and firm that I wanted to exist, I knew it had to exist. I had spent the previous 3 or 4 years talking to founders who look like you and me, who had either fantastic ideas or who were already in their company making money, who could not get into a room to talk to an investor. And I just thought, what a missed opportunity for so many people if we don't do this. So it was like the the genius of the founders that I was surrounded by that kept me going.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, this is going to work. So it wasn't. So that may not be relatable to everybody listening, but you may know. This is how I measure it. So I said this in the book. If you can imagine, you're working on something right now and you're like, should I keep going with it?
Mm,
Right? That's always something we're wondering. If you can imagine the world in 5 years where the thing that you're working on doesn't exist and you're okay with that, then it's okay to maybe pivot, leave it. But if you imagine the world 5 years from now and you can't stand the thought of the thing you're working on not existing, like it has to exist, then you found something that you need to work on. Now here's the kicker: if you found it, if you can't imagine it, but it needs to exist, even if you don't make it happen, even if you don't get, I should say it like this, even if you don't get to see it happen, then that's your calling.
yeah,
And that's how I felt about Backstage. I'm like, oh, it has to. There's no way it can't, even if I don't get the credit for it.
it has to exist. I love that. I love that. So as we wrap, I want to kind of pivot. So, this month, February, is Black History Month. It's also when we celebrate Valentine's Day.
Yes.
So thinking about historical figure, Black figure, what is love? Who represents love for you?
Mm. I think love is. I mean, you're saying all those things. I think love is all the people who I just described who didn't get to see all of this.
Mm,
There's that phrase, "We are our ancestors'
yes,
wildest dreams." That's love. Is what they endured for us, and our love will endure for our offspring and for our the next generations. I think that, it's the love of a people.
I love that. I absolutely do. That really touched me on the inside. So
Thank you.
I thank you so much for your time. This
Thank
has
you.
been, yeah, absolutely. This has been such a great conversation. I greatly appreciate you. And Arlan Hamilton, thank you for lending your voice on an intimate conversation with women of color. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.